Everybody get up, it's time to slam down. We've got a real jam going down. Welcome to the Smackdown review. August 14th, 2018. Hey everybody, call it in the ring. I'm Marcus Stewart, and we are on the final show before Summerslam 2018. Smackdown Live, hailing from Greensville, South Carolina. See, that's the town that's in South Carolina. There's Greensboro last night, or the day before, on Raw. Now it's in North Carolina. South Carolina has Greensville. Greensboro. Too many greens. And just a reminder that if you're listening to this on YouTube, first of all, thank you. And you can also download and subscribe to the show on iTunes. Just search for Marcus Writes About Games. You can also do the same on Podbean. Once again, Marcus Writes About Games. If you want to download just a purely audio version of this, which I guess technically the YouTube version is pure audio too. But if you don't want to keep your YouTube app open because you don't feel like paying for YouTube Red on your phone, those are two fine alternatives. Anyway, let's hop right to it. So, this show kicked off with a three-way confrontation between Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and the SmackDown Women's Champion Carmella, all in the ring, facing off for their final kind of war of words before they face each other for the championship at SummerSlam. This was pretty much Carmella just kind of ripping on the other two, bringing up Becky's previous history as a clown, which is actually a real thing. Becky was a professional clown at one point. And saying that, hey, maybe that's the thing, like, you should go back to being a clown because that's the only thing you're probably better than Charlotte Flair at. And got in a pretty decent jab saying that the only reason Becky was the first SmackDown Live's Women's Champion was because Charlotte was on Raw, which almost kind of, in a way, harkened back to the, if you remember ECW One Night Stand back in 2005, there was a segment with Paul Heyman where he was ripping on the WWE guys, the Invaders, and one guy was JBL, John Bradshaw Layfield, and he kind of made fun of JBL's 10-month WWE Championship reign the year prior, saying that the only reason that JBL got that reign in the first place was because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays, which implies that Triple H did not want to go on SmackDown. He'd rather stay on Raw. That's what that reminded me of. I was like, oh, okay, shots fired here. Flair referred to Charlotte as a diva living in a woman's world, which Carmella was like, you're damn right, I'm a diva, and just kind of said that she, like, oh, I'm more beautiful, I've got a better body, I've got more charisma, and also I'm the champion. And this didn't lead to any violence because Paige came out and decided to make a tag match between Charlotte Flair and Becky, taking on Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose, with Carmella on commentary because according to Paige, that's all she's good for. That match started immediately, and it started off with Flair and Sonya, and watching those two, I don't know why, but I feel like a solo program between Sonya Deville and Charlotte Flair would be really cool. And I have no real reason of why for that. I don't know, something about watching those two work together. I was just like, that's an interesting matchup. I wouldn't mind seeing more of those two together in a singles capacity. You got the kind of MMA thing with Sonya, which is unfortunately in a WWE that now has Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler down in NXT. That's less impressive or less unique. So I've been worried about where Sonya goes. I mean, thankfully she's on a show by herself, but she'll need something else because she is not the only MMA chick in WWE anymore, but she is probably a distant third in terms of like, I guess, skill ladder, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, or at least like in terms of name value for sure. Compared to two halves of the four horsewomen of MMA. So I don't know. It's nothing that she needs to worry about right now because she's on her own, but something I just wanted to that I've been thinking about for a while. Carmella was just being her normal cocky self on commentary, which, she's a ball of charisma, just a ball, a sphere, a planet of charisma. If she was a Marvel Comics character, she would be Ego, the living planet, because she has an ego the size of a planet. You see what I did there? And I'm not talking about the, Kurt Russell ego from the second Guardians movie, the actual ego, the living planet. But you see what I did there, right? Huh? Nerds? You get it? I'm a nerd too. So, anyway, Becky picked up the win with the disarm her submission move. Nothing came post-match, but honestly, I could see Charlotte picking up the win at SummerSlam and then Becky chasing her. I don't know. I would like to see Becky win, but for some reason I feel like they're going to want to have Becky chase this into the fall against Charlotte and kind of continue this, maybe turn up their rivalry a bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if Charlotte walked away with the title on Sunday. We get a little selfie promo with Miz and Maurice announcing the great news that Miz and Mrs. Season 2 has already been greenlit. Even though the first season is only 3 episodes in, I think 3 weeks now. I guess it's been doing really good. I have not watched it, so I can't say. The most I've seen is the first few minutes every time Smackdown ends and it kind of, immediately starts. But I don't have anything against it. I'm not really into reality TV and I just haven't had time to really sit down and watch an episode. Maybe I should at one point just to see what it's like. But yeah, Miz and Mrs. Season 2 is happening. Congrats to them, I guess. Of course, they announced this in their usual smug way, which is great. We see Flair and Becky backstage and they wish each other luck somewhat passive-aggressively. Nothing came out of this. This led to a tag team match, a handicap tag team match, 3-on-2, with the local team of 3 guys that refer to themselves as the Triple Threat, taking on the Bludgeon Brothers, our Smackdown tag team champions. Of course, this was exactly what you would expect, and just complete and utter destruction of the Triple Threat. I guess they were more of a minor threat, which is a reference to, of course, the straight edge punk band. If you listen to those guys, if CM Punk is listening to the show, I'm sure he's nodding his head in approval. These guys got slaughtered as they should have been, and the match actually never started. The Bludgeons just kind of beat the crap out of them before the bell, so this wasn't a match. This was just them. It was an exhibition of destruction on behalf of the Brothers of Bludgeon, which could be their other cool name. Next up, we got the first of what was 3 segments of a history, a review of the history between Daniel Bryan and The Miz, just pretty much breaking down their 8-year rivalry, which I thought was a really, really cool idea because these two have such a storied history, and this was a great way to catch people up on, if you weren't there for all of it, get everyone up to speed before their big showdown this Sunday. And the first part was, of course, the NXT era, the original NXT, back when Bryan debuted in 2010, and NXT was more like a game show than the third brand that it is now. And of course, Bryan was, the king of the independent scene at the time. He'd been wrestling all over the world for 10 years and then finally got to WWE. And in the original NXT, there were 8 rookies, and I use rookies in air quotes because they were generally trained wrestlers that maybe were no names. And then each one was paired with a WWE superstar to act as their pro, which was basically a mentor role. And famously, Miz was paired with Bryan. And at the time, this melted the internet. I remember when this was announced, people lost their damn minds. They were so angry because this is when Miz was, he kind of still is, but not as much. But for a long, long time, Miz was just hated by the internet fans because, his background, and he's never been a great wrestler. He's fine. But people hated him, and then to take For the idea of him having to mentor this Daniel Bryan, who was just this god on the indie scene, was brilliant on WWE's part, because it was the perfect contrast of like showmanship and pure in-ring ability. And I remember loving it. And it worked out because they have such a natural rivalry, and there's very few of those you get in wrestling. Like, I might have said this before, but you think of like Shawn versus Brett, Austin versus Rock, Trish versus Lita. Miz and Bryan is up there because they are just such the antithesis to each other, that and it helps that they don't fit. They're just they play off of each other so well, and this was the first time we got to see it. And of course, it ended with Miz or Bryan getting eliminated early on in a shocker, and he never won any of his matches. And it was cool because they were showing clips, and then they had Bryan and Miz both sitting there talking about their time there. So you're kind of getting both of their points of views of like Miz saying that, oh, Bryan thought he was so great, but he never won a match. Maybe he should have listened to me. And then Bryan countering that, saying that like, I didn't win a match because I was stuck with you. And like, turns out that the moment I debuted on Raw after NXT, the very first match that he had was against Miz, and he won. So his very first win in WWE was against the Miz. And it's like, that's when he realized, like, when he was allowed to just be himself and do things his own way, he won. So this was good stuff. And we'll touch on this a little bit more as the other two segments air. This brought us to another tag team match between Sanity and the New Day. It was Kofi Kingston's birthday yesterday. Happy birthday to Kofi. Killian Dane is in a singlet now. He's not wearing his kind of like warrior belt diaper thing that he used to wear. He's in a singlet, which I'm not super big on. I liked his old look better. He looks too much like a traditional wrestler now, and before he looked like a scary Irish warrior that you found in like a castle in the woods or something like that. So I mean, it'll take some getting used to with this new singlet. It doesn't really match the aesthetic of Sanity either, like, the kind of chaotic look to me. So I wonder if that was like a Vince call. I wonder if he didn't like Dane's body, because he's a big dude, really hairy, but I thought that gave him a great look. He stood out. So I don't know what's going on there, but this was a fine back and forth match. We've seen both of these teams wrestle numerous times. New Day picked up the win, as they should have, because they're the number one contenders for the tag titles this Sunday. At the same time, Sanity needs something. They're this faction that is all about chaos, and I would like to see more of that. Have them like beat people up backstage, like, or just tear some shit up. I'm kind of suggesting what the Riot Squad is sort of doing, but instead of just tipping over a chair and maybe knocking some papers out of a head, maybe like slaughter an actual person, something like that. So, but in this case, it was unnecessary evil in this particular case. This brought up our second Miz and Bryan segment, which was the Talking Smack promo. Now, even though that's quite a big jump between NXT, because that was in 2010, and that famous Talking Smack promo, which was in 2016? 2016, yeah. Towards the end of 2016. Though they did make up for that, as before they actually got to the moment that they wanted to talk, they had clips showing everything that both guys had done in the years between. So we got to see, each of them winning like the US title, the Intercontinental title, both of them winning the WWE Championship and main eventing WrestleMania. So you did get the like, oh, okay, here's where they are, here's what they did, and now we've reached this point where like Bryan retired. Of course, they covered Bryan's retirement and then becoming the general manager of SmackDown, and then the famous Talking Smack promo, which, if you're not aware, Talking Smack was, and occasionally still is, was a post show, like at the end of every SmackDown on the WWE Network. It would be kind of like a post show where like Renee Young and Daniel Bryan at the time, or like the general manager, would have some of the wrestlers that maybe did something on the show come in and just talk about what they did. And it was a very fun show because it was clearly not scripted, and the wrestlers could just kind of talk and be themselves and talk about and kind of advance their storylines. And I think this was the first episode of Talking Smack, or one of the first, where it ended very famously with, Bryan, who's one of the hosts, having Miz come on, who Miz was Intercontinental Champion at the time. Him and his wife Maurice came on. And of course, Miz and Bryan get at it, because anytime Miz and Bryan are within 2 feet of each other, they just have to go at it. And they got into this big argument where, like, Miz was, a villain, as he almost always is. And I guess, I can't remember why, but Bryan accused him of taking shortcuts and being soft and not acting like a real champion. And then Miz just blew up on him, saying, like, just going off on him, saying, like, how can you call me a coward? I was like, I've never been injured, like, just because I wrestle a safe style. And, like, what about you? You're the coward. You're the one that should be. He's like, you're the one talking about how you love wrestling, how you love these fans, but you had to walk away. If you weren't a coward, you would quit and go wrestle in bingo halls again. And just this crazy promo that really opened a lot of eyes to Miz, which was kind of crazy because Miz I'd already been sold on Miz years before that point. But this was this was easily one of his most defining moments where he like just vented on Bryan. And then Bryan like walked away, and then he's like, don't you walk away from me, Bryan. And then of course that led afterwards where Miz kept stealing Bryan's like wrestling moves in the ring and mocking him. And that's kind of the point where kind of like the beginning of their modern day feud was this promo, because, Bryan was the GM and was still not cleared to wrestle. So he couldn't do anything. And this drove a lot of fans like me too crazy, because like this was a great story. And you're like, this has to pay off with like Bryan kicking Miz's teeth in, but he can't because he can't wrestle. So how do you pay this off? And now we're gonna get the payoff. But yeah, this was the second part of that. Again, I love this stuff. So let's see. Paige goes to see Samoa Joe backstage, and I guess they're gonna do some sort of face-to-face, Joe and AJ. And Paige just kind of tells Joe to keep it professional out there. Joe is like, nah. He's like, you chose me for this spot because I'm unpredictable, and how unpredictable would it be if I was, to do things the way that you want me to? So pretty much he's like, thanks, but no thanks, screw you. And he's going to do whatever he wants whenever he pleases, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And Paige is not happy. Not happy at all. Aiden English versus Andrade Cien Almas. This is kind of Aiden trying to make up for the last few weeks of accidentally screwing over Rusev and Lana every time they have faced Almas or Zelina. They announced that at the SummerSlam pre-show there will be a mixed tag match between Rusev and Lana versus Almas and Zelina, because SummerSlam is 15 hours long. And yeah, this match was pretty uneventful, except for there was one point where Aiden hits a frog splash from the top rope, complete with a little bit of chest pounding, which, if you're not aware, Aiden English is actually married into the Guerrero family, the Guerrero wrestling family, where of course Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Hector, Mondo, Chavo Sr., all those guys hail from Vicky, of course, most recently. He is married to Eddie Guerrero's daughter, actually, Shaul Guerrero, who used to be in WWE back in NXT years ago, like when NXT was just starting out, like the new NXT, or the current NXT, not the game show NXT, but when this NXT that we have now first launched. Shaul Guerrero was a superstar on it. And yeah, Aiden's married to her, so he's technically a Guerrero. So I thought that was, I'm assuming that was kind of a nod to his wife's family. But it was not enough. He lost to Almas, of course. And then after the match, Andrade and Zelina get on the mic and declare the end of Rusev Day will come at SummerSlam, and Vega saying that she will expose Lana as dead weight to her husband. Rusev and Lana come out to the stage for a retort and say that they will show why they are the best and that they are number one, and they are going to crush Almas and Zelina at SummerSlam. It should be a fun match. It just probably really doesn't need to happen at SummerSlam because it's already got 109 matches on it. But that's big pay-per-views now. They got to be They have to be as entertaining as they are endurance runs. So Paige runs into AJ Styles to pretty much give him the same speech that she gave to Joe of like, hey, let's keep it cool out there, guys. AJ says that he spoke to his wife and that he promised his wife that he would not lose his cool in the ring tonight. This brings us to our third and final Bryan versus Miz history lesson, and this was focused on Bryan's return to the ring earlier this year, and Miz saying that he didn't care because he was on Raw at the time. But of course, Bryan, when his last act as general manager before he stepped down was to have Miz moved over to Smackdown, which still makes me laugh. I thought that was a brilliant little thing, a little development when that happened. It was like, hey, get your ass over here since I'm cleared now. let's do this. After almost 2 years of you running your mouth and hiding behind my injury, that's not a thing anymore. So, and this is, just covering that and then and just building up to their encounter, both of them promising that they're going to beat the other and prove that they're better than the other one. Miz claiming that he has nothing to prove to Bryan because he's already surpassed him because he has a TV show and a nice house and knows celebrities and all this stuff and movies. And Bryan saying like, yeah, he might have surpassed me in those areas, but I didn't come back to be that kind of guy. I came back to be the best wrestler in the company, and that he's going to prove to Miz that he has always been a better wrestler than Miz. So I hope that match gets the time that it needs because SummerSlam is so packed. That's one of the matches that needs to get time because just the story behind it alone is going to be enough to carry it, let alone that both guys can deliver in the ring, especially Bryan. And they've had good matches in the past, so that really should not be cut short. That and like AJ and Joe need to get that time, man. That time, brother. So really excited to see that match. Our next match, Shelton Benjamin, who is still a living, breathing person, taking on Jeff Hardy and his lollipop sleeves. This was a, decent match, just to reinforce that Jeff is really good at what he does. He won the match with a twist of fate into a splash, like a standing splash pin. It's always nice to see, much like Baron Corbin on Raw, winning with the deep six. It's always good to see wrestlers win with things that aren't their finisher because it keeps the matches interesting. Because otherwise you're just sitting on your hands until someone hits their big move because it's not going to end until it does. So I appreciate those surprise endings. Shinsuke Nakamura comes out to the ring to attack Jeff. But for the first time in what feels like forever, Jeff finally gets the better of his enemies, hits the twist of fate and the swanton on Nakamura, sending a message before they square off for the United States Championship at SummerSlam. In an unintentionally hilarious moment, Jeff gets knocked out of the ring, and then they show Randy hiding behind the set, kind of peeking, like half peeking, and just kind of like staring at Jeff from the distance, kind of like, I guess, menacingly. But like, I don't know, the way they shot it, because they show like the camera kind of behind him, so you kind of see him just kind of like hiding there. I feel like it would have been better if they showed him head on, like if a camera from like the ring area zoomed in, like if they notice Orton way in the distance, like what's that, and then they slowly zoomed in and you see Orton just staring. That probably would have been creepier, but the way they did it, they had the cameraman like right next to Randy, kind of walking around him, and it just looks weird where you just see him like hiding, but like not hiding because he's on national television and the camera's right next to him, so everyone sees where he is, and it looked more silly than menacing, like I said, and it made me chuckle a bit. But Randy is watching. Randy's always watching, and if that doesn't become meme fodder, then I will be very proud of the internet for their restraint. So, Randy peeking. Good stuff. This brought up to our final segment of the show. AJ Styles comes out to the ring to address Samoa Joe. Again, he says that, unlike the first time when he responded to Joe, where he was pretty much ready to decapitate Joe, he's had a chance to go home and talk to his wife and his kids, and just get a chance to cool down. And his wife saying that, hey, you can't blow up out there. You can't blow up. And AJ saying that Joe baited him into talking about something like his very personal issues, like his life, that I guess he doesn't really like to bring up, but Joe baited him into bringing up his family and taking him to a dark place. But now he's had his head on straight now, and he's not going to let Joe do that again. Joe comes out to respond to this with a letter supposedly written by a member of the WWE universe. And he's like, hey, let me just read this letter. And the letter talks about how he was, this person was watching Smackdown and heard what Joe had to say regarding AJ's perceived feelings on his family and how disgusted he was. But not at Samoa Joe, but at AJ Styles. Like, how could AJ Styles, how could he choose being champion over his family? This person used to be a huge AJ Styles fan and no longer is, and hopes that Samoa Joe takes the title away from him at SummerSlam. But the twist was that, oh yeah, and then the person says that, because AJ has already lost me, AJ lost me a long time ago. And then Joe reveals that the author of this fan letter was Wendy Styles, who I don't know who Wendy Styles is. I'm assuming that's supposed to be his wife, because the only other girl in his house, in AJ's household, is his very young daughter, who's like maybe 1 or 2 at this point. I don't know his wife's real name. I don't care to know. So, I'm assuming the implication was like AJ's wife supposedly, of course, wrote this letter to Joe saying like, beat my husband so he can come home and be a family man. He's like, basically, that's what this story is. Actually, it's Guile from Street Fighter's like post-fight message of go home and be a family man. That's what this Samoa Joe is. Guile. He is evil Guile. I just realized that. Evil Guile Samoa Joe. And that's where we wrapped up the show. It was the revelation, or the revelation in air quotes, because obviously I think Joe is obviously just making this up to get into AJ's head so that he can take the title from him more easily. But regardless, I am pumped to see that match, and it's still really cool to see these two having a world title program in WWE after years of enjoying both of them in TNA. Should be some great stuff. And SummerSlam should be great stuff, if not long stuff, but great stuff. And we'll see what happens this Sunday, but this Smackdown was a okay so-so show, gave us the final hard sell. I thought the Miz and Bryan stuff was pretty outstanding and probably the highlight of the show for me personally. And yeah, I just want SummerSlam to happen at this point. Like, I'm ready for it. So thank goodness it's this Sunday. And of course I will have a SummerSlam review. Hopefully try to get it out Monday. SummerSlam's such a big show, so like I might record it right after it, but I doubt it. I'll probably want to sleep on my thoughts and record a podcast Monday morning like I did with Extreme Rules. So look forward to my SummerSlam thoughts. So once again, if you want to listen and subscribe, do so on YouTube. Subscribe, like, share. Again, the holy trinity of social media. And again, you can find all this at iTunes at Marcus Writes About Games and Podbean at Marcus Writes About Games. And if you want to reach out to me personally, you can find me on Twitter at MarcusStewart7. That is the number 7. And until next time, keep watching wrestling, never ever stop, and I will see you after SummerSlam. Bye-bye.